Welcome back to Morgantown, West Virginia, and the first Fox News debate of the 2018 midterms. The three candidates on the stage are hoping to take on Senator Joe Manchin in November and flip this Senate seat from blue to red. Let's get back to the questions.
Okay, gentlemen, if you would, welcome back. If you would, please raise your hand if you support Mitch McConnell for Republican leader in the Senate.
He hasn't asked.
Okay, we noted your duck. We noted your duck. We got that.
Yeah, I don't want to have any doubt about it.
Okay, Congressman Jenkins, you're not raising your hand. You've been a beneficiary of groups tied or aligned with the Senate Majority Leader. Why wouldn't you support him?
You know, Mitch McConnell hasn't even asked for my support. I think it's way too premature. I think, candidly, Mitch McConnell deserves a debt of gratitude for being able to hold a Supreme Court seat open so Neil Gorsuch could be on the Supreme Court today. What I'm interested in doing is getting through the November election, bringing a much-needed Republican vote to the United States Senate, and then we're going to see who's running for Senate. I'm not ruling anybody in. I'm not ruling anybody out. Nobody has asked for my support. What I will do is make a decision on who is going to lead the Senate to support the President Trump agenda.
And so I'm noticing you're not raising your hand either.
No, listen, I'm not the product of the liberal establishment. I think that's why you're seeing all the conservatives come out for me. I'm going to make the right decision after we get through the general election. But I'll tell you this, I wasn't the one recruited by the liberal establishment because of his very questionable record. Once again, Obamacare support, cap and trade support, donating to Joe Manchin, holding a fundraiser at his house. That's not the West Virginia values we need to drain the swamp in Washington.
All right. Well, Mr. Morrissey, let me stay with you for a moment.
Mind if I respond?
Go ahead. You can respond.
Yep, go ahead.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, Patrick Morrissey continues to spew his lies and misrepresentations. And, you know, they said don't bring out any papers. We had PolitiFact, and all the things that Patrick is saying, supporting Hillary, cap and trade, Planned Parenthood, PolitiFact went through each and every allegation and said false, 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 false. And unfortunately, Patrick thinks if you keep saying it time and time and time again, people will think it's true. Patrick Morrissey, PolitiFact, everybody has debunked everything that you've said. You stood next to me and endorsed me 3 years ago and said I was right for West Virginia. What's different now?
Evan, I didn't know that at the time that you were willing to lie so much and as much of your liberal background. I won't make that mistake again.
All right. Moving right along, Mr. Morrissey, on your website, you tout an endorsement from Steve Bannon. President Trump recently
Am I not
said...
going to speak about McConnell?
You will.
You will. Mr. Trump recently said when he was fired, he not only lost his job, he lost his mind. That's a quote from President Trump. The last person that Steve Bannon endorsed was Roy Moore. Is this an association that you're proud of?
Listen, I think it's very clear. I said at the time that it happened, when Bannon went after Trump, I thought it was reprehensible. You don't go after family members and a wife. You just don't do that. Those are not West Virginia values. And what I would argue is that we have a broad array of support throughout the conservative spectrum. Senator Ted Cruz, Senator Rand Paul, we have West Virginians for Life. We have all the principal conservative leaders backing my candidacy because they know there's a huge difference between my record going after Obama's overreach and his record, and this is a fact, rallying for Hillary Clinton and working side by side on the Obama team. It took him 5 years to get off the Barack Obama team. That's opportunism, not principle.
Okay, we're going to get to Mr. Blankenship. Congressman Jenkins, do you want to respond? And who did you vote for in 2008?
I will tell you I did not vote for Hillary Clinton. I am proud to support the Republican. The problem is they went back and fact-checked, looked at every comment I ever made and said Patrick Morrissey is lying. The problem is Patrick Morrissey won't look at the camera, won't look at the people of West Virginia and say why he did not vote for Donald Trump for president in the May primary. He is the one who said publicly Donald Trump wasn't my first choice. Who was your first choice?
Well,
Patrick?
let me be clear, and this is a great opportunity. So I'm the only candidate on the stage who not only has voted for Donald Trump at the convention and in the Electoral College. We said we couldn't bring paper up, but I was one of only 5 people in West Virginia to be part of the Electoral College. People that are trusted to support the president get to be in the Electoral College. So, but Evan Jenkins, we know in 2008, in 2007, actually, he rallied for Hillary Clinton. He supported John Kerry for president. It's a very liberal background. And Evan, you said your philosophy was progressive mainstream back in 2003. What changed with you?
We are going to get...
Who did you vote for in the May primary in West Virginia? I endorsed and voted for Donald Trump. Who did you vote for?
I support the president, and that's why just a few weeks ago, right? Just a few weeks ago when I sat next to the president, and Evan was there as well, that we have a great relationship. We've worked together. I was proud to run ads with the president and support him at the convention. Look, there are a lot of people that were not. Evan supported him the day before the primary. That's no profile in courage.
Okay, Mr. Blankenship, to your wish here.
Can I go ahead and comment about something?
You wanted to talk about Mitch McConnell, didn't you?
I do, but I will go ahead and do that. You want to ask a question?
I do want to ask you a question.
They've talked about it enough that I think I can clarify it.
Okay, let me ask you a question. You know, both of these gentlemen mentioned that we had rules, that you couldn't bring paper, you couldn't bring props. You were going to bring props, and we had to kind of take them away from you. And you had these hats that said "Ditch Mitch." You wanted to wear one of these hats, and it was against the rules. So we said no to that. But you have called the Senate Majority Leader a host of different names, including most recently Cocaine Mitch, a reference to an allegation that drugs were found on a ship in 2014 owned by his father-in-law. So here's the question. If you are elected to the U.S. Senate and Mitch McConnell is the Majority Leader, how will you get anything done for West Virginia?
Well, first of all, he won't be the Majority Leader. But let me clarify that both of these guys are right. They're both lying. Anybody that tells you that they're going to go to Washington, D.C. and drain the swamp and don't know whether they're going to vote for Mitch McConnell or not is not telling you the truth, because McConnell has to go to drain the swamp. When he went to D.C. 35 years ago, the national debt was $2 trillion. And now the national debt is $22 trillion. $20 trillion while Mitch McConnell's been there. He has conflicts of interest with China. His family is very powerful in China and very powerful in the United States. One of the things that President Trump is going to face is economic dealings with China, where they now have a $358 billion surplus over us in trade. And he's also going to face issues about human rights and a whole source of other things. Mitch McConnell was one of the few senators that voted after Tiananmen Square not to have punitive actions against China for human rights violations. They killed 500 to 1,000 people at Tiananmen Square. You have to wonder what he's doing. But if you want something else that you should be able to tell you shouldn't vote for McConnell, he interferes with elections all over this country. He's interfering with this election. How are these guys going to stand up when McConnell tells them to sit down, like when Schumer tells Manchin to sit down, when they're going to be beholding to him for having elected him? The reason that Schumer and McConnell have so much power is they control these super PACs. And it's these super PACs that these guys are afraid of, and that's what Joe Manchin probably means when he says that Schumer's too powerful. McConnell's no different. If they tell you that they're going to drain the swamp, but they don't know if they're going to vote for McConnell or not, can't be true.
Mr. Blankenship, let me just clarify here. Let me just clarify. When you're talking about Mitch McConnell's family, you're talking about the father of the current Secretary of Transportation, President Trump's Secretary of Transportation, Elaine Chao, the father who you called a China person. She is a key decider in infrastructure projects, which might be a big deal in West Virginia. How do you get along and get things done by slinging insults like that?
I'm not going to D.C. to get along, so that won't be a failure, because I don't intend to get along. I intend to make sure that we make a difference. You know, this idea that calling somebody a China person, I mean, I'm an American person. I don't see this insinuation by the press that there's something racist about saying a China person. Some people are Korean persons and some of them are African persons. It's not any slander there. But both families are very powerful in both countries. I've previously been on the board of 4 or 5 major corporations. You do not send family members out to negotiate purchases and deals with other family members. It's called a conflict of interest.
All right. We want to get a quick answer, if we can, from each one of you on this. Right now, there is a bipartisan bill in Congress to prevent the president from being able to fire Robert Mueller, the special counsel, in the investigation. In other words, should the president have the right to fire the special counsel? Mr. Morrissey first.
Well, first of all, the president is the head of the executive branch, and I do think he has a lot of say over who is in his Justice Department. With respect to the Mueller investigation, I think it needs to come to an end. It's a witch hunt.
Do you think the president should fire Robert Mueller?
Look, I think this should come to an end. If it came to an end very quickly, then we wouldn't have to deal with all this endless string of accusations. It's distracting to the president. The president has done a lot of really good things for West Virginia and our country, deregulating the economy, good Supreme Court justice. He's doing a lot of positive things. I think that's a sideshow, and it should come to an end.
Mr. Jenkins, bipartisan group that got together, they would like to restrict the president on this. What do you say?
I am very clear. End this investigation now. I've seen the documents. I've seen Comey's outrageous leaks. I have seen the witch hunt that has gone after this administration. The Democrats can't give up on the results of 2016. They're fighting this administration each and every day. End this investigation now.
Mr. Blankenship?
Well, you know, I've had a little personal experience with the Department of Justice. They lie a lot too. So, you know, it's one of those things where when you know what really goes on in the Department of Justice, you wonder where this country's going. It's really crazy. But the Mueller investigation should end, but hopefully it'll be ended before I get there in January, so it should be okay.
To everyone on the stage here, ask a question to everyone. This is on the issue of coal. Senator Manchin is working with the Trump administration, trying to protect the coal industry by invoking a national security law, decades old, much like they've done for the steel and aluminum industries. Do you agree with Senator Manchin on that? Mr. Blankenship.
On the tariffs, is that what you...
This is on trying to protect the coal industry using that same law.
Yeah, I think that protection has to be used very carefully. I do agree with it in this case because I think that, you know, that we've got so many products coming in the U.S., whether it's steel, coal, whatever. We've got products that are being produced with, you know, human rights violations, with people that aren't being paid. And to a great extent, this country has, you know, been a victim of that. All the workers in the United States have been victims of the fact that we're buying stuff from overseas, and those purchases do not pay any taxes for the roads. They do not pay any taxes for Social Security. They do not pay any taxes for your medical care. So when you buy that product, it looks inexpensive, but it's actually very, very expensive because if those products were being made by American workers, they would be paying taxes that would help balance the budget, help provide medical care, help get people off the street, help fix the opiate epidemic. But it's a very dangerous, slippery slope to go down, and it needs to be done analytically, and it needs to be a situation where all 132 countries are looked at in terms of human rights violations, environmental stewardship, and whatever else you want to consider. And then the products need to be looked at individually, and we need to tax the products that we can make cost effectively here and provide American jobs.
Mr. Morrissey, same question on the coal specifically, using the national security law.
Look, I think we need to do everything imaginable to bring coal back. And here's what happened over the last 8 years. Under Barack Obama, he had an absolute assault on coal miners' jobs. And when I got in 2013, I sued the EPA. By 2016, we had that historic Supreme Court win stopping President Obama's top initiative in court. That was a big win. We saved thousands of coal miner jobs. But a lot of damage was done by the Obama administration. They basically tried to force compliance with the utilities, to force utilities to close down, stop burning as much coal. So I do think, whether it's looking at issues of national security or my recent proposal, which is going to jury-rig, spit up the amount of met coal production in our country by relieving them of some of the regulatory burdens in place at the EPA, we should do all of the above to make sure that West Virginia has a chance to recoup, because it was a war on West Virginia.
Well, let me ask you this just quickly. If you did that, how does that match up with your small, conservative values, smaller government? What you're suggesting here, do you think Senator Cruz or Senator Paul would be for doing what you're proposing?
Well, I think that all this is consistent with getting back to a place when Barack Obama says he's going to put a whole industry and coal miners out of business. All we're trying to do is get back to some level playing field to be able to allow coal miners to mine again. So I think it takes ensuring that there will be markets. I'm the most free market-oriented guy here on the stage. But I would say this, when you have damage that's inflicted that's so severe, you have to look at different ways that you can mine and sell coal again.
Congressman Jenkins, same question.
I think you're giving Joe Manchin way too much credit. You're repeating exactly what Joe would like you to think.
You don't
he's
think
fighting
he's
for
working with the Trump
coal.
administration?
The problem is Joe's not a fighter for coal. He says one thing and he does another. Joe Manchin supported Barack Obama. Joe Manchin fought hard to elect Hillary Clinton. He is causing our pain. He might like to think he feels the pain. Joe Manchin has it wrong. I stood there in the White House with President Trump where he signed the piece of legislation I authored, the lead sponsor of, that saved 1/3 of all the coal mining jobs in America. That's making a difference, and we already see the results with less regulations. Jobs are coming back. It's unbelievable. Patrick Morrissey talking about your limited government, he took a pledge in a campaign to eliminate the Department of Energy. We're in Morgantown, West Virginia. Hundreds of jobs right here under the Department of Energy to find a future for coal. We don't need to eliminate the Department of Energy. We need to find a coal future. These are important jobs.
We've got to head to break here.
If I can, very briefly, I find it very rich that the person who just voted for the big pork omnibus, $1.3 trillion, has the gall to talk about smaller government. I'm the only proven conservative in this race. We've gone after spending, voluntarily returned a lot of money back to the Treasury here in West Virginia. So a lot of inconsistency, my friend.
Patrick, I eliminated $500 million from the budget of the EPA. I have cut the cost and size of government. You want to do away with the Department of Energy, the DOE jobs here, or creating a future for West Virginia?
You got to leave it there. We got to take a break. Hold on. Coming up next, we'll be back with the lightning round from West Virginia and Morgantown. Great night. We'll be right back after this break.
I want to go back to the one I love.
Rocky Top.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Metropolitan Theater in Morgantown, West Virginia. Now we have a lightning round. These are going to be 30-second answers, and the first one is for Congressman Jenkins. After Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu laid out evidence of Iran's lying about the nuclear deal, if you had a decision as U.S. Senator, would you vote to end that deal, or do you think it's wiser to continue it?
I want to take a brief second. Playing Rocky Top for Tennessee and West Virginia. It's country roads here, folks, not Rocky Top.
Duly noted. Duly noted.
Duly noted.
You know, we're proud West Virginians. You know, we get put down so many times. People make fun of us. So that's what my candidacy, what my life has been about, standing up for who we are and what we believe. So sorry to jump in. It's about West Virginia. It's West Virginia pride.
Okay. Now, what about Iran?
You know what? The Iran nuclear deal was a disaster. The idea that we've got pallets of cash being shipped to Iran, Barack Obama made a disastrous deal. We've got a deadline coming up. Donald Trump should end the Iran deal.
So even though the Even though the head of the leadership in Iran has said that they would instantly restart their nuclear program if that deal were ended. You're okay with that?
You know, I respect the state of Israel. I have been with Benjamin Netanyahu in Jerusalem. I understand the forces of evil that are all around Jerusalem. The state of Israel is absolutely essential. We support them. We defend them. But the idea that Iran and their nuclear program, it was a terrible deal. It needs to be ended. We need to go back and negotiate a better deal that will protect the world.
Mr. Blankenship, President Trump has talked about getting U.S. troops out of Syria. He also, though, after meeting with the French President Macron, talked about possibly having them stay for some time. What's the right choice?
I don't think anybody up here knows what the right choice is, because you got to know a lot more than we know. But I don't agree with going around the world and putting ourselves in harm's way for when enemies are fighting one another. But back to the Department of Energy, there's 19,000 of them, or somebody told me it was. I never met one. I produce more energy than anybody in the history of this area. So it doesn't make any sense. So I'd be for cutting the Department of Energy to about 200 people and getting rid of about 18,800.
Attorney General Morrissey, #1 threat facing the U.S.
I think we have to go back and look. President Trump has very adroitly handled ISIS, and I think what's going on in the Middle East remains a powder keg. But North Korea, I still am very distrustful of what's going on between North Korea and South Korea. I commend the president, though, because his tough talk has actually gotten us to a place, perhaps, under this president, we're not going to have a repeat of the failure of Bill Clinton back in the 1990s and all the other administrations that were led astray when North Korea promised they weren't going to develop their nuclear program. President Trump deserves credit for that, but we have to watch it very, very closely.
I want to ask each of you to give me a 30-second answer on this if you can. The national debt is now over $21 trillion and growing. Fiscal conservatives say that the problem cannot be solved unless we begin to reform entitlements. Senator Manchin has said he will protect all entitlements. Would you accept any changes to Social Security, to Medicaid, to Medicare? I'll take it first, Mr. Blankenship.
Well, it's pretty simple. You have to. The Republican Study Committee has come up with something that looks very good to me at a distance. You know, the big thing that has to happen is we have to have fewer people on welfare. Some of you may remember Reagan's words that we shouldn't judge our success by how many people are on welfare, but how few people need it. And that's the real answer. And we're going to have to put people to work. What that Republican study says is that, you know, people should have to work even if they're on welfare, if they're able to work. They should be drug tested, of course. And those things will make a difference. It's not that hard. You know, it's just a matter of whether you've got the resolve to do it. It's apparent to me these two guys don't.
Congressman Jenkins, would you do that? Would you put people, are you going to institute a work requirement for Medicaid or for Social Security in West Virginia?
We've actually authorized at the federal level the ability for states to be incubators of innovation. The idea of imposing work requirements absolutely is a good idea. Let me talk to the West Virginia seniors. Medicare, Social Security, they should absolutely be protected. We should not privatize. We need to honor the promise for our seniors that we have made. But look, we just were able to cut the largest amount of taxes in U.S. history. We cut over $1 billion. I am a believer that a good job solves a lot of problems. You put more money in people's pockets, not the government's pockets. Get them back to work. We can grow the budget and take care of our seniors. It's a promise I won't walk away from.
Mr. Morrissey, would you cut Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare?
Well, I think it's critical that we absolutely keep our promise to our seniors. Now, that has to be a top priority here in West Virginia. So many people are relying on those benefits. But I will note, we can do a lot more as a country and a state to go after fraud, waste, and abuse. In my office alone, we created a disability fraud unit that saved $10 million in a little over 2 years. I think we can go after Medicaid fraud. There's literally tens of millions of dollars lying around. Same in Medicare. That's my background. I'll go after it. I won't be afraid of the D.C. establishment. We'll make the changes to protect people's benefits, but ultimately ensure that we rid out the waste, fraud, and abuse.
Each candidate will now make a brief closing statement. We're doing this in reverse order. We begin with Mr. Blankenship.
What I would say is I'm up here with two guys that's never created a job. and jobs in West Virginia are the most important thing. I'm up here with two guys, that one of which oversees the worst district in the nation for drug abuse deaths, and the other one lobbies for and works with and has friends that work for the drug companies that cause that. I'm up here with guys that get money from Planned Parenthood or perhaps have voted for funding of Planned Parenthood, and yet I've given $200,000 to Right to Life to protect the unborn. So they're not going to fix that problem. And on human rights violations, whether it be the Second Amendment or any of the amendments, I'm more conscious of how fragile they are and how badly they need to be protected.
Mr. Morrissey.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is one proven conservative fighter in this race. During the time when Barack Obama was wreaking havoc on our way of life, I stood up, I sued Barack Obama, we won, and we protected West Virginia jobs. When it comes to the important questions of the day, West Virginians for Life has stood strong with me because I'm the pro-life fighter, fought off the abortionist, who other people get to work with for long parts of their career. We can make a difference, and I'd ask you to think of one final thing. We need a proven conservative to take on Joe Manchin, who's not the same on all the issues. I'm the only credible conservative on the stage.
Mr. Jenkins.
Well, thank you so much, showcasing West Virginia. I'm a proud West Virginian, married a West Virginia girl, raised 3 children, and my oldest son is serving our country in the United States Marines. It's who we are. It's service. I proudly endorse Donald Trump, working with him each and every step of the way. Patrick was a never-Trumper. He's surrounded by never-Trumpers. We need somebody who will support our president, stand up for what we believe. I have a 100% voting record with the National Right to Life and a 100% voting record and an A+ rating with the NRA. Proud West Virginian. We're going to take out Joe Manchin this November. I'd be honored to have your vote.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. That concludes our debate tonight. Very interesting. The night is just beginning.
Indeed it is. I will be back next with more of the story. We thank all of you for being here tonight.
Thanks for joining us. Great evening. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
2018 midterms here in Morgantown, West Virginia tonight. The 3 top Republican candidates faced off to decide which one of them will take on incumbent Democrat Joe Manchin come November. Good evening, everybody. I'm Martha MacCallum. Tonight, just a preview of what we can expect over the coming months and weeks as we watch this all play out across the country. It will be a battle to the finish line as Republicans try to hold on to their majority in Congress, and Democrats try to sway voters by countering conservatives and the Trump White House. West Virginia is just one of 4 states that is heading to the polls this coming Tuesday night, May 8th. Indiana, Ohio, North Carolina, all have big races to watch, which Brett and I will be covering for you that evening. All of those states carried by President Trump in 2016. So here in West Virginia, the Fox News Power Rankings say it is a toss-up between Democrats and Republicans. And tonight, this race really just got a whole lot more interesting.
I have the conservative West Virginia values. If you look at the congressman, he actually has been very liberal. If you go Obamacare, checkbox, he supported. Hillary, he went and rallied for Hillary. Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, Planned Parenthood spending just a couple weeks ago. Evan, you should be ashamed of yourself for that outrageous vote, killing the unborn.
Joe Manchin is on the Chuck Schumer team. He's sitting there with Elizabeth Warren, with Bernie Sanders. He's got a 70-80% voting record with them. That's not West Virginia. I welcome the opportunity to take on Joe Manchin this November and replace him and bring a much-needed Republican vote to the United States Senate.
Mr. Blankenship, isn't it true that you live in Nevada? You pay taxes in Nevada. And in fact, your probation officer is in Nevada, and yet you're running for U.S. Senate in West Virginia.
Yeah, I paid probably more taxes than anybody on this stage to West Virginia.
If Joe Manchin comes after you for living in Nevada, what do you say?
Then he's lived in D.C. too long.
Interesting night. Chris Darwalt, West Virginia native and Fox News politics editor, live outside the theater tonight. Chris, I'm interested in how you think these gentlemen did up there tonight.
And I tell you, we had to come inside because they're still rocking out. I don't think they want to go home. They had so much fun with you guys. But I got to tell you, I think Blankenship probably did himself a world of good tonight. He didn't talk as much as the other two, but he was substantive in his answers, and he was down in the polls coming in here, and maybe he did okay, especially on that Mitch McConnell answer.
Yeah, let's take a look at one of the other very interesting moments from tonight, and the candidates were asked to raise their hand when it came to the majority leader. Watch.
Please raise your hand if you would support Mitch McConnell for Republican leader in the Senate.
He hasn't asked.
No hands, Chris. No hands up there.
And Blankenship was headed for the deck. So it was interesting when you listen to the answer from Jenkins and Morrissey. They were leaving their options open. They said, look, you know, I'm not going to support him today, but maybe I'm going to vote for him, da-da-da-da-da. Where Blankenship is telling, these are primary voters. These are the Republicanist Republicans. And he said no, and that'll mean something.
Yeah. Let's take a look at one more moment here, Chris, and Brett is about to join in as well and get a look at this. Let's play one more moment from tonight. Let's watch.
I have the conservative West Virginia values. If you look at the congressman, he actually has been very liberal. If you go Obamacare, checkbox, he supported. Hillary, he went and rallied for Hillary. Nancy Pelosi, John Kerry, Planned Parenthood spending just a couple weeks ago. Evan, you should be ashamed of yourself for that outrageous vote, killing the unborn.
Pretty hot out there. Let's bring in my co-anchor, Brett Baer, who helped moderate this evening. We worked on it together all week, really, coming up with the questions for tonight. And, of course, the chief political anchor at Fox News. So tell me, what did you think? It was interesting. Morrissey and Jenkins, in particular, were really going at each other.
Really going at each other. I do want to clarify one thing. There is a Morgantown, West Virginia song that they took from Rocky Top, Tennessee, and it says Morgantown instead. So... there was a correct song played. It's just...
But it did give Evan Jenkins another opportunity to say how proud he is to be from West Virginia.
And maybe gave him some time to think about what to say about Iran.
Exactly.
But I thought it was interesting to watch the dynamic between Morrissey and Jenkins. Obviously, Blankenship had some interesting lines. And listen, don't take away the possibility that West Virginia could go with an outsider. I mean, obviously, Donald Trump plays well here. You saw how they tried to out-Trump each other all night long. At 87% approval, they're going to do that.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing to watch, if indeed tonight is good for Don Blankenship, when they look at the polls and everybody sorts it out, is what the Republican Party is going to do back in Washington, because they went through a similar exercise in Alabama, and it didn't work out so well. Of course, Don Blankenship doesn't want to be compared to Roy Moore, but that's the comparison that's made because of his time in prison. And where would they come down if they started to see him take off?
I don't know. You know, Don Blankenship is not Roy Moore. He's got some one-liners. He's got some, outside, positioning. I think the traditional bet is to go with the congressman here, you would think. But I think this is going to be a close race. As you look at our poll, it's anybody's game.
Absolutely. And Morrissey and Jenkins clearly think that they are, that people are going to choose one or the other of them if they're not going the Blankenship route. And they were clearly trying to define themselves in a very strong way tonight. So interesting stuff. Final thought, Chris Tyrewalt?
They were too mean to each other. They were too embittering, and they were at each other constantly. Too many negatives. They were driving up each other's negatives, and they will pay a price for that.
We will see. Thank you so much. Chris Tyrewalt, native West Virginian, Rocky Top kind of guy. That's what we tend to see. Thank you, Brett.
That was fun.
Seeing you tonight. It was fun. So, good hell.
I know.
All right, still ahead tonight, we've got a lot coming up on the story. Kim Jong-un taking more positive steps today toward a peace deal. But should President Trump trust this man? Former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice has one word, and she will join us live in just a moment. Plus, the big question tonight, who is behind the stunning leak of questions that Special Counsel Mueller wants to ask President Trump? And what does it mean for the future of this investigation? Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry and Constitutional Attorney Jonathan Turley take that on right after the break. is behind the latest bombshell leak in the special counsel Robert Mueller's probe into Russian collusion. In a stunning development, we now know at least some of the questions of the special counsel and how he wants to grill President Trump if he gets the opportunity. But how does this monumental leak happen? Fingers are pointing in all directions tonight, with some, if you can believe it, straight at the president himself or perhaps some of his people. Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry live with all of this tonight at the White House as it unfolds. Hi, Ed.
Martha, great to see you. It may be hard to pin this leak on special counsel Robert Mueller because senior White House sources are telling me tonight he and his lawyers are unlikely suspects over at the special counsel team because all of these questions tip their hand publicly about where they're going. Instead, insiders close to the process focusing on the part of the Times story saying this list of questions was compiled by the president's lawyers, led at the time by John Dowd, after a series of meetings with Mueller. Dowd tonight told me, quote, "It's not me, pal." But note, he left the president's legal team earlier this year after concluding Mueller's long list of questions could put the president in legal jeopardy if he sat for an interview. This leak widely seen as an attempt to sabotage that interview. The Times added the leak was a person outside the current legal team, meaning it could not be White House lawyer Ty Cobb or the new outside lawyer Rudy Giuliani, since they are currently on the team while Dowd is not on the team. Now, I'm told Cobb and Giuliani are both privately saying they still want the president to find a way to do an interview to try and end this probe. The idea that the president himself leaked it seems remote because he has been pushing to do an interview too. And whomever leaked this list of questions seems to want to scuttle an interview because there are at least 4 dozen questions that frame this as a pile-on. Mueller pressing for answers about the president's meetings with James Comey, Michael Flynn, Attorney General Jeff Sessions, plus questions about whether he spoke to lawyer Michael Cohen about real estate deals in Russia, which would seem to cross the red line the president established about his business. And if the president was a leaker, he seemed to disguise it, tweeting, quote, "So disgraceful, the questions concerning the Russian witch hunt were leaked to the media. No questions on collusion. Oh, I see. You have a made-up phony crime, collusion, that never existed, and an investigation begun with illegally leaked classified information." Nice. Meanwhile, Republican Trey Gowdy, Bob Goodlatte are probing some of James Comey's leaks, sending a letter to Sessions and Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein seeking documents on a friend, Daniel Richman, that Comey used as a go-between. Back today at House Republicans preparing articles of impeachment against him, saying that the Justice Department, in his words, will not be extorted. I can tell you Republican Mark Meadows just fired back at that and said that Rosenstein should focus on facts, not rhetoric. Martha.
Wow, Ed, thank you very much. Good to see you tonight. So joining me now, Jonathan Turley, constitutional law attorney and law professor at George Washington University. Jonathan, good evening to you.
Hi, Martha.
When these questions started pouring out, we all poured through them to try to figure out what they tell us about the direction of this investigation. What was your overall takeaway with the tenor of these questions and what he's going for?
Well, first of all, the release of these questions was a very aggressive act, and it's most likely someone who doesn't want the interview to occur. You don't poison a well that you intend to drink from. And that's what this was an effort to do, to show that the questions were broad, to possibly justify a refusal by the president to sit down with Mueller. Otherwise, most of the questions, I'd say 90%, were highly predictable. If you were to sit down and write out the questions about 3 months after Mueller was appointed, most of these questions would be those questions. Now, there are some that do cross that red line that Ed was talking about, going into business dealings, but those are largely dealings that we knew were on the radar screen from Moscow. I actually think the president could deal with these questions. He could be properly prepared. Where he has to be concerned are the sleeper questions, the ones that look like they're innocuous or housekeeping. For example, when did he first learn about the Trump Tower meeting? He has denied knowing about that before the meeting. So has Donald Trump Jr. The Democrats are trying to establish that it was Trump who is the so-called blocked caller referred to in the House committee report investigation. They did not determine that number. Mueller may have. He has subpoena authority, and he could have determined who made that call at a critical point when that meeting was being discussed.
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating. When you look at some of these, they are very open-ended, and we all know the way that the president likes to answer questions and sometimes, you know, ramble into different territory. They're not specific. They're not questions that would be answered with a yes or no. Do you think that is a setup for him?
Oh, I think there may be a setup here. Whenever you go into these things, you have to assume that it could be a perjury trap. That doesn't mean you have to fall in it. I've done a lot of depositions that are a lot more complex than this. He has very good attorneys that will be there with him. If he preps, if he prepares with those attorneys and listens to them, yes, I think he could get through this. I also agree with them that the alternative is not particularly appealing. If he decides to bunker down, then Mueller could hit him with a subpoena. Now, he could challenge that in federal court, but I think he would lose. Now, does he want that to be the media being generated going into the midterm elections? That's a tough call to make, and it will come at costs.
Jonathan, always good to talk to you. Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Mo.
You bet. Jonathan Turley. Coming up next.
So far, whether you look at the Clinton administration or the Bush administration or the Obama administration, it never worked out. That was the time to have settled this problem, not now.
So what does the former Secretary of State, Condoleezza Rice, think about that? And really the whole picture for the Trump campaign right now. A lot going on with North Korea and Syria. We're going to talk about that when she joins me live next.
The sooner that North Korea would choose to unconditionally come back to the table, it would be to the betterment of everyone.